Hello, students. Welcome to the final revision of all the short stories that we are going to cover before the ICSE 10th board examination. So, I hope the Josh is high. Make sure you watch this video until the end and you will be thorough with all the short stories because we're going to cover every detail in this. So, without wasting much time, let's begin. The first short story is With the Photographer and it is written by Stephen Leacock. Just a way for you to remember the author. We usually like to take a photograph of a peacock. So, With the Photographer is written by Stephen Leacock. Yes. So, let's go through the main characters. So, there are two main characters in the story. First is the photographer, and the second is the narrator who wants his photo taken. Yes. So, if they ask you a description of the photographer, you should know that he's a drooping man wearing a gray suit. So, drooping is someone who's bending with age. And picturize him wearing a gray suit. His eyes are dim, just like a natural scientist, and the narrator says that he looks just like any other photographer. So remember these 3 points if they ask you the description of the photographer. The next one. According to the narrator, how did the photographer seem? So according to the narrator, the photographer seemed unenthusiastic. He seemed rude or unkind because he gave brutal remarks. And also he seemed unsympathetic. Now moving to what the photographer said to the narrator and what did he do. So please remember these details. First, he said the face was wrong. Second, he said it would be 3/4, it would be better 3/4 full. And then he took his face in his hands and twisted it sideways. Okay. Now, what all alterations did he do before he clicked the picture? First one, he asked the narrator to open his mouth a little bit and then he asked him to close it. So remember, first is the mouth. The second, he went to the ears. He said the ears are bad, so to droop it a little more. The third, he said, roll the eyes under the lids. Next is he asked him to put the hands on the knees. Then turn the face slightly upwards. Then expand the lungs, hump the neck, contract the waist, and then twist the hip towards the elbow. So if you do these actions once or twice, you can memorize what all alterations the photographer did to the narrator before clicking the picture. So after that, what happened? The narrator lost his patience, he lost his cool, and he became enraged. And what did he say? He said, "This face is mine, not yours. I have lived with it for 40 years and I know its faults." And he also says that I have learned to love it. And as he was about to leave and get up from the stool, the photographer clicked the photo, isn't it? Okay, and what did the photographer say as he clicked the photo? He said, I have caught the features just in the moment of animation. So this is important. I hope the story is clear until now and you can recall everything. Let's move forward. They might ask you what all changes were made to the photo. First is the eyes were retouched. The second is the eyebrows, they were removed by a process called Delphide and new eyebrows were put in. The second is the photographer carried the hair away from the brows. Next, he adjusted the mouth a little bit. Then the ears were not touched, it was the same. But the photographer said we can remove the ears by using a process called sulfide. So just for you to remember the process, first he's talking about the eyes, then above the eyes is the eyebrows, then he removed the hair that had come near the brows, then is the mouth and the ears. So I hope you can remember this. Next important point is the reaction of the narrator after seeing the proof of a large photograph. So he had called him to see the proof of the photograph, not the real photograph. So remember this. So he said he wanted a picture that looked just like him, just like how heaven had given him. And he said he wanted a keepsake that his friends might keep after his death, so that they can reconcile them after his loss. And he was fuming with anger. And what did the narrator say? Take your negative, dip it in sulfide, bromide, oxide, or cowhide. Then, if you want, adjust all the features, gloss it, shade it, emboss it. And once you're finally done, keep it to yourself and your friends because they may value it. But for me, it is just a worthless bauble. So these are the 4 points that the narrator said after looking at the proof of the photograph. Now we are coming to the theme of the story. What is the theme of the story? The first one is society is obsessed with physical perfection, and in the process, the individuality and authenticity is lost. The second one is the narrator has a strong sense of self-awareness about his physical flaws and self-acceptance, where he is aware about his physical flaws but has embraced it. He has accepted it. But when the photographer insults him, he feels humiliated and his insecurity increases. The third one is camera technology. Technology has advanced so much so that it has increased the mechanical reaction and it has altered the images so much that it does not accurately depict the appearance of a person. So there is a lot of artificiality now because of technology, and we all give importance to physical perfection rather than accept or embrace physical imperfections. And yes, let's quickly move on to the next story. So the next short story is The Elevator, which is written by William Sleater. So the main characters in this story, first is Martin, who is a thin 12-year-old boy. The second is Martin's father. The third is the fat lady. And towards the end, they have briefly mentioned Mrs. Ullman. That is why I have included that also. So Martin and Martin's father, they shift to an old apartment building which had an old and a very small elevator that could only carry a maximum of 3 people. And Martin was uncomfortable of elevators. Why? So there are 5 reasons. So we're just going to revise that. The first one, he was afraid that the elevator would fall. The second one is he was scared of that elevator particularly because of the poor lighting inside and because of the dirty walls. Apart from that, usually the elevator slammed shut with a loud noise which scared him. Apart from that, it shuddered each time it left a floor, and he was afraid that it would abruptly stop and trap him there for hours. So these are the various reasons why he was uncomfortable of elevators. Now, I also want you to recall why he did not like the stairs. First is there were no windows or ventilation. The lights there near the steps were not working, so it was dark and dingy. And whenever he walked, his footsteps echoed like someone was following him and catching him. That is why he was scared to use the stairs as well. Moreover, he stayed on the 17th floor of the building. So it would get quite tiring to climb 17th floor. Now, what did the father think of Martin? So the father thought that Martin was skinny and weak. He was bad at sports, and also he was a coward and a timid boy. So he body shamed him as well as told him that he was a coward and timid boy. So let's give you a description of the father. The father is an impatient person who criticizes Martin every now and then. Also, he brushes off Martin's concern. So there is a lack of care and affection from the father's side as he is cold and unaffectionate. The father is a person who prioritizes toughening up rather than supporting him emotionally. So this is also a very important part that you should know. Now they might ask you the appearance of the fat lady. So if you remember, the fat lady was wearing an old green coat that was ballooned around her. And also she had large fleshy cheeks. She had no chin and a huge mass of neck, and also blue eyes that were tiny but sharp. So please remember the appearance of the fat lady. The next is, this is just for you to remember where she had got on the first time and where did she go. So first she got on the 14th floor to go down. The next day she got up on the 3rd floor and she went up until the 18th floor. And finally, on the last day after Martin's father got down on the 9th floor, she got in on the 10th floor. What was the father's reaction to Martin asking about the woman? So he was very dismissive and he asked, when are you going to grow up and act like a man? Are you going to be timid all your life? After Martin fell from the stairs. His father was disappointed and angry because Martin was being a coward and a fool. And if you remember, the plot ends in a very suspenseful note because the boy is immobilized with fear and he's at the mercy of the ominous woman and we don't know what happened. So let's quickly discuss the theme of the story. The first one is, many young boys are pressurized to suppress their emotions of fear and are forced to show bravery just because they are boys, which affects their mental well-being to a large extent. Apart from that, many youngsters face isolation and loneliness, especially when their parents don't try to understand them and they have to solitarily struggle to face their fears. Apart from that, the story also shows the dysfunctional relationship between a father and the son, where the father is constantly criticizing the son and who only focuses on the son toughening up rather than understanding him emotionally. So it gives us a reminder that how young children, especially boys, also need emotional support. So within 5 minutes, we have quickly completed this. Now let's move to the next story, which is The Girl Who Can. And it is written by Amma Ata Aido. So there are 3 main characters in the story. First is Adjoa, who's 7 years old, Mami, who's the mother, and Nana, who's the maternal grandmother. So Adjoa was born in a very big village, and the name of the village is Hazodzi. And it is a very fertile land with good soil, unlike the other places in Africa. So what was the serious problem according to Adjoa? So the biggest or a serious problem what Adjoa thought was that things she can think in her head but lacks the proper language to speak them. So she thought it was a big problem that there are a lot of thoughts that came into her mind, but she was finding it difficult to articulate them in proper language to speak. Also, she was very indecisive whether to speak her mind and get laughed at or to keep quiet. Also, it was a big struggle to get a grown up to even listen to her and also to catch their attention. So these were the serious problems according to Adjoa. First is articulating what she wanted to say, then deciding if she has to keep quiet or speak it out and get laughed at, and also to gain the attention of the elders. The next, Why did Adjoa find the adults confusing? So she found them confusing because sometimes when she spoke, she was asked not to repeat something that she says. So never ever repeat that is what she was asked to say. Or other times, not only would it be all right for her to speak, but it would be considered so funny that it would be repeated so many times for the other people's enjoyment. So she was really confused whether to speak or not to speak and what exactly to speak. The next is, what was Nana's problem with Adjoa? So Nana's problem with Adjoa was that Adjoa's legs were too thin or too spindly and also too long for a woman. Because she believes if a woman has legs, they should have meat on them. That means they should have good calf, and so that they would support strong hips, which in turn would be able to bear children or support children. That was Nana's problem with Adjoa. Now, Adjoa wanted to see the other older women's legs, but it was difficult for her to see the legs of older women. Why? First is the older woman wore long wraparounds all the time, and second is she was never allowed to bathe in the river where the other women went and bathed. So she was never able to get a glimpse of the older woman and see their legs. Now, Mami, her mother, supported Adjoa's education because her mother herself felt locked into some kind of darkness because she did not go to school. And also, she thought that if her daughter was educated, she could always marry later and maybe work or get any greater opportunities. That is why Mami wanted Adjoa to get education and Nana was against it. So since Adjoa was very good at sports, she was selected for the district games in the junior section to run. So in the beginning, Mami and Nana did not believe it because they believed that her spindly legs were good for nothing. But then Nana supported Adjoa by washing her uniform every day and also pressing her uniform, means ironing her uniform. And also, Nana went into town every day for the district sports week to support her granddaughter. And once Adjoa won every race that she participated, she won the cup for the best all rounder junior athlete. And how did Nana support her? Nana carried the gleaming cup on her back and she was proud of the accomplishment of her grandchild. Then she went and showed it to Mami before returning the prize to the headmaster. So that is when Nana realized that thin legs can be useful. And even if Adjoa did not intend to make them realize, unintentionally she made her grandmother realize that thin legs can also be useful and they are strong. So let's quickly go through the theme of the story. The story reflects on the conservative views about the role of women in the society, which is just bearing children and also looking a certain way that women should not be thin and thin women will not be able to bear children. Also, the story challenges the societal expectations of women and the belief concerning their physical attributes. So the societal expectations were challenged and they were the conservative view was proved wrong. Also, how education plays a vital role in empowering a person, and that without that, a person can feel helpless or a person can feel like they are in total darkness. And now let's quickly move on to the next story. So the next story is The Pedestrian, which is written by Ray Bradbury. So mainly there is only one main character, which is Mr. Leonard Mead, and there is another character, which is the mechanical voice, which comes from the police car. So this entire story happens in a dystopian society, which is in the future, which is AD 2053. So this is the story about Mr. Leonard Mead, who takes walk post 8 p.m. and mostly until midnight in the streets that were quite deserted. And in his 10 years of walking for thousands of kilometers, he has never encountered another person. So now I have compiled what all Mr. Leonard Mead sees and what does he compare it to. So the first is the homes with the dark windows. They are compared to walking through a graveyard. The next is inside the house. He compares the people to be grey phantoms who he can see walking in the inner room walls because the curtains were undrawn. So people are compared to grey phantoms. The next he says that the houses, they are tomb-like buildings with faintest glimmer of firefly light. So this firefly light can be the lights of emitted from the television, which glimmer like they are fireflies. The next he talks about his shadow, and he says that his shadow looks like a shadow of a hawk which is in mid-country. Next, he imagines himself in the center of a plain, wintry, windless Arizona desert. So he says when he walks through the deserted streets, it feels like he is in a plain, wintry, windless desert. Then the houses, which are the tombs, they are ill lit. They are not lit well, but they are only ill lit by television light, where people sat like the dead, where the light touched their face but never really touching them. So this is all what Mr. Leonard Mead sees and what he compares to. So here he's comparing the house to tombs, and people he's saying that are literally like dead people because they are emotionless and they are just sitting stationary. So this could be a question, that is why I have mentioned it. Why did he change his footwear to sneakers? So when he wore hard heels, the dogs in intermittent squads would parallel his journey, that is walk with him when he strolled at night, and they barked loudly. So when they barked loudly, the entire street would be startled, and when they looked down, they would be startled to see a lone figure walking at night. And when he saw a lone car that was on the streets, he was stunned like a night moth due to its illumination, and then he was drawn towards it. So even if it was a city of 3 million, why weren't there a lot of police cars? So police cars were a rare and incredible thing because the crimes were ebbing, which is reducing, and there was no need for a police. Mr. Leonard Mead was a writer, but in spite of being a writer, it was not considered a profession anymore because magazines and books did not sell anymore. So people did not read any magazines or books, and also that he hadn't written in years, especially because they don't sell anymore. So therefore, it wasn't considered a profession anymore. So based on various questions asked by the mechanical car, Mr. Leonard Mead was arrested. So let's see for what all reason he was arrested. First is he was walking post 8 p.m. for no particular reason. So when he was asked a reason, he said just for air or to see the vicinity. That was one reason. The second reason is that when asked if he owned a television screen, he said that he did not own a viewing screen. The third is that he was not married. And the last was he walked every night for the past many years. And for all these reasons, he was arrested. And where was he arrested and taken to? He was taken to the psychiatric center for research on regressive tendencies because he was somewhere different from all the other people in the society. So if you see on the way, all the houses were dark except one, and that house was brightly lit with every window having a loud yellow illumination which gave a warmth in the cool darkness, because all the other places It was quite dark and only his house had a warm yellow light. So this signifies that he was different from the society, who was much more alive and awake, and not like the deadened user who were consumed by technology and who sat like the dead. So this is the gist of the story. Now let's go to the theme of the story. So the society has become isolated and disengaged, where people prefer artificial interaction to real human connection. That is why people don't get out of their homes. Also, if the addiction to technology continue, then the world would be devoid of life and emotions. That is why people will be as good as dead or lifeless, because they will be addicted to such technology. Also, the story emphasizes that over dependence on technology for entertainment can make people feel lonely, as they will not be talking to anyone else. So, this was the pedestrian. Now, let's move to the last lesson, which is written by Alphonse Daudet. So, the main character is Franz, the small boy who goes to school. Then is Mr. M. Hamill, and a very small character is Watcher, the blacksmith, who tells him that he can take his own sweet time to go to school. Okay. So why was Franz in great dread to go to school? See, he was in great dread because first is he started to school very late in the morning. He was getting late to school and he was scared that M. Hamill would scold him. Apart from that, Mr. Hamill would question on participles and he hadn't learned for it. So these were the three reasons why he was in great dread to go to school. What tempted him to miss school? So outside it was quite warm and bright, and he could hear the chirping of the birds. And that was much more tempting than the rules of participles. But still, he controlled his urge and decided to go to school. So, normally, when he would go to school, there would be a great bustle which he could hear right out in the streets. He could hear the opening and the closing of the desk, then the lessons that were repeated in unison, and also the teacher's ruler would be rapping on the table. So, all of this on a very normal day he could hear. But that day was quite unique. Why? Everything was unusually quiet, just like a Sunday morning. M. Hamill was wearing a dress which normally he would wear only on inspection days or prize days. So, what was that? He was wearing a green coat with a frilled shirt inside, and he was wearing a small black silk cap. And the back benches that were usually empty were filled with village people, and also everyone looked quite sad. So, this was something unique that day. So, what was the news on the bulletin in the town hall? So, the bulletin usually gave only bad news. So, the news was order had come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, and hence it would be their last French class. So, when he heard the news, Franz's reaction was the news was like a thunderclap to those words when the professor uttered it. And he was sorry for not learning his lesson. So he was feeling remorse or repentance. He was feeling sorry that he did not pay attention to his lessons. He regretted for seeking birds' eggs or going sliding on the Saar. Another thing, until then, books that seemed as a nuisance, so heavy, the grammar and the history of saints now felt like old friends that he could not give up. So when he knew that they would never be learning French again, he felt all of this emotions. So why were the men in the village sorry? They were sorry because they had not gone to school more often, and Now they were present on the last day because it was a way of thanking Mr. Hamill for his years of faithful service, because he had dedicated 40 years towards teaching, and also showing their respect for the country that there was no longer theirs. Who did Mr. Hamill blame? So Mr. Hamill blames, first of all, the people of Alsace because they keep procrastinating and they keep saying that they will keep it until tomorrow to learn. He also blames the parents because they were not anxious enough for their kids and preferred to put them for work in mills and other places rather than sending them to school. Lastly, he blames himself because he had sent them to water the plants. He had given a holiday to them when he wanted to go fishing. So, what is the praise for the French language which is written? He said that it was the most beautiful language with the clearest and the most logical sense. And he also said that people must guard it, because when people are enslaved, as long as they hold on to their language, they hold the key to the prison. So these were the major events that took place in the last lesson. For Franz, everything seemed so easy because he had paid the most attention or listened very carefully in that class. So he felt that everything was very easy. And he also felt that the sir had never explained with so much patience because he wanted to teach everything in a single day. Apart from that, everyone was working so quietly and so attentively that nobody paid attention even to the beetles that flew in. In the third point, Hauser, he was crying and his voice was trembling with emotion. And M. Hamill, he was sitting motionless, trying to retain all the things in his mind because he would be leaving this place forever. And finally, as the bell rang, M. Hamill was tongue-tied. He could not speak because he was choked with emotions. So finally, he wrote on the board, Vive la France, which means long live France. So what is the theme of the story? That we should not take our freedom for granted, as we never know when we might be deprived of those privileges. All of them, including the sir, the parents, the students, everyone took their freedom for granted. And unexpectedly, one day, that freedom was taken away from them. The second is regret is the prominent theme of the story, where the native people, the children, regret to have missed the opportunity to learn their own native language because they had the key to open the prison, but now, without knowing the language, they were in prison. The story also shows us the importance of language because it serves as a cultural identity. So this story teaches us an important lesson that we should never procrastinate. And thus we have successfully completed the revision of all the short stories from Treasure Chest. I hope this method helps you to recall everything before the examination because this is concise and in bullet form. Please share it among your friends so that they can also gain from it and can score good marks. God bless. I'm praying for you and you're definitely going to get the marks that you desire. Thank you.